Good morning on this glorious day in Boston. Hope you're having a great beginning to the new week. So, on Shabbat and Shul, I shared with the community a beautiful letter of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, blessed memory, in response to a woman who wrote to the Rebbe that her life is cursed and she has so many challenges in her life, etc., etc. And the Rebbe wrote back to her and tried to contrast two people. He says, look at the first person, Adam. God created Adam. He molded him himself. He put him into the Garden of Eden, paradise, and he gave him Chava, that God himself created for Adam. And yet, God says to Adam, you could eat from everything except the tree of wisdom. And yet, Adam feels cursed. He feels like he's missing something. And then the Rebbe says, contrast that with people in the concentration camps in Poland who were emaciated, were starved, were in the camps, were getting ready to be sent to the gas chambers. They were stripped of everything. They became a number. And yet, they would get up in the morning and would say, Modeh ani lefanecha, thanking God for giving them life, even in that horrific space and time. The Rebbe said, so you could be in paradise and think you're cursed. Or you could be in hell and appreciate it and think and thank God for the gifts that he's given us. The Rebbe said like this to this woman: most of us are not in paradise or not in hell. Our lives are somewhere in the middle. And the question is, how do we see ourselves? What's the perspective we give on our lives? Do we feel like we're in hell, or do we feel like we're in paradise? And it's all about how we are in touch with our spirituality, with our God-given gifts. And you know, in this week's Torah portion that we read on Shabbat, God ejects Adam from the Garden of Eden. Adam eats from the tree of wisdom and God tells him not to, and then he hides because he's worried that he's naked, and God calls out to him, and then God sends him out. But it's interesting, if you read the verses in Genesis, first it says, Vayishalcheyu Hashem, God sent him from the Garden of Eden to work the field. It doesn't say his name, it just says he sent him. And then the verse after, it says, Vayigaresh et ha'adam, he evicted et ha'adam, the person. And the question is twofold. Firstly, why does the verse say that God first sent him, and then it says that he evicted him? Why the double verse? And secondly, why in the first verse does it just say him, which is obvious, we know he's talking about Adam, and in the second verse, it says et ha'adam, the person. And there's a daring interpretation from the Zohar that says like this. You see, the word et is representative of the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God that dwells in everything. Every single table, every single chair, everything in the world has a spiritual DNA. Some might call it a molecule that Einstein called it, but it's a spiritual DNA that makes things tick. And the word et represents that Shekhinah. Why? Because et is Aleph and Taf. It's made of two letters. The beginning of the Hebrew alphabet and the end, which encompasses everything in the world. The whole alphabet. And therefore, in Kabbalistic terms, the word et represents the Shekhinah. Says the Zohar, the name of Rabbi Elazar, who kicked out whom from the Garden of Eden? Did God kick out Adam, or did Adam kick out God? And he says, if you look at the second verse, it says, Vayigaresh et. And they kicked out et, the Shekhinah. Who kicked him out? Ha'adam, the person. You see, the Zohar says like this: everything stayed the same. God didn't evict Adam from the Garden of Eden. But in their radical idea of the Zohar, it says what happened was that Adam stopped seeing the Shekhinah, the presence of God, the paradise he lived in. And the moment he stopped seeing the et, he was evicted. He didn't have paradise anymore. It was a he problem. And the moment Adam would dig back in and find that spirituality, find that Shekhinah, he would realize that he's still in paradise. You know, no one's denying that life is not simple. We have challenges, we have struggles. There's pain, there's uncertainty, there's suffering. But at the end of the day, the perspective is ours. Do we see the et? Do we see the hand of God? Do we see Shekhinah, the divine presence in our lives? Or do we not? And really, it's up to us. When we disconnect, when we don't see it, then we evict ourselves from the Garden of Eden. And all we have to do to get back is to dig deep into our spirituality, into our godliness, and to find the et, to find the divine presence, the divine Shekhinah. There's an old story about the people of Chelm. So Chelm happened to be a very smart city. Because they were so smart, all the jokes about them were about how stupid they are, and that they were the silliest people. And they say the story about this guy who worked very hard. His wife always kept him on his toes, doing things. And one day he turns to Almighty God. He says, God, genug shein, enough. I want to go to paradise already. I lived a good life. Bring me to the Garden of Eden. God says, are you sure? He says, absolutely. God says, you're sure? Because there's no going back. He says, yes. And God says, fine. I want you to start walking eastwards for 2.5 hours, and then you're going to turn to the right, and you're going to go another hour, and you're going to come to paradise. He says, really? God says, yes. So he starts trekking. He walks for 1 hour, hour and a half, but he gets tired, and he needs to fall asleep. But he's scared. He says, what happens if I forget which way I'm going when I wake up? So he takes off his shoes, and he points them in the direction of where God told him to go. And like this, he'll make sure that he goes the right way. And he goes to sleep. But you know, things happen in life. And the shoes get turned around. And he wakes up in the morning and he sees his shoes. And he knows he has to go that direction. He puts the shoes back on and he starts heading back to his town, not realizing that he was going the other direction. After an hour, of course, he comes up to a little town. He says, oh, this must be paradise. What God told me. But wow, it looks eerily similar to the town that I came from. Maybe there's such a town in the paradise. And he goes and he says, yeah, this is different. Look how clean it looks. My town was dirty. Look at the birds chirping. And he sat down in the center of town and he watched. Kids were going to school, coming home, playing. The city was hustling and bustling. It looked so clean. He says, amazing. After a few hours, he got hungry. He says, you know, maybe if there's a town just like mine in paradise, maybe there's a house just like mine. And sure enough, he starts walking and he sees the house just like his. He says, maybe there's a woman just like my wife there. And he goes in, and sure enough, there's a woman. And his wife sees him. She says, oh, come in. She makes him the most delicious meal. He says he's never tasted anything so good. The soup was divine and hot. And the salmon and the fish and the chicken, it was delicious. He eats his whole meal. And he says, you know, maybe if there's a house like mine and there's a wife like mine, there must be a bedroom like mine. He goes upstairs, and he lies down in his bed, and he falls asleep. And he had the most blissful sleep he's ever had. He wakes up, and sure enough, there's his wife with a bunch of tools telling him, you gotta go work. He says, work? I'm in paradise. And she says, yeah, even in paradise there's work. And so he lived out every day of the rest of his life, thinking that he was in paradise, continuing the life he lived. And that's really the message that the rabbi said in the Zohar. Who kicked whom out? Was it God that kicked Adam? Or did Adam cease to see the paradise he was living in? Did he cease to see the et, the Shekhinah of God in the world? And the same is true in our lives. No one's denying that things might not be perfect always. But we have to open our eyes and be cognizant of the es, of the Shekhinah, of our spirituality, of the godliness. And then we will always be living in a paradise. Have a great day. Have a beautiful week. And may you feel like you are in paradise. God bless you.